Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just dive straight in because we've got an incredible story today. Imagine a football match that plays out way less like your standard sporting event and much more like a cinematic survival thriller. We're talking about the 2026 World Cup Round of 16 knockout match between co-hosts Mexico and England. And this wasn't just a game of tactics or raw talent. It was this grueling, completely chaotic test of human endurance and psychological resilience. We're going to break down exactly how one of the absolute most hostile environments in world football pushed a team to its breaking point, and how, miraculously, they actually survived. To really understand what England was walking into, you just need to know this one staggering number: 2. Before a single ball was even kicked, England was already facing a massive mountain of history. Mexico had only lost 2 competitive matches in 89 appearances at the fearsome Estadio Azteca over 56 years. Just think about that for a second. For over half a century, this stadium has been an absolute graveyard for visiting teams and their World Cup dreams. It is a genuine fortress. England was walking right into the Lion's Den to face an undefeated Mexican side that hadn't conceded a single goal in the entire tournament.
But honestly, the history is kind of just half the battle. 7,350. That is the altitude in feet of the Estadio Azteca above sea level. I really want you to imagine the physical reality of playing in that. The air is so incredibly thin. Your lungs are just burning with every single sprint, constantly fighting for oxygen that simply isn't there. And it doesn't just mess with the players' bodies. It literally alters the physics of the game. At this altitude, aerodynamic drops by about 20%. So every long pass, every cross, every shot travels significantly faster and flies about 5 yards further than it normally would at sea level.
To put that monumental challenge into perspective, Thomas Tuchel, England's manager, was super upfront about it. He plainly stated that it is physically just not possible to adapt to the altitude, and he was completely right. England's previous match was in Atlanta, which sits roughly 980 feet above sea level. You simply cannot acclimate a squad to a massive 6,000-foot jump in elevation in just 4 days. It's biologically impossible. England absolutely knew they were stepping onto that pitch at a massive physiological disadvantage before the whistle even blew. And if the altitude wasn't crazy enough, the pre-match buildup was absolute chaos. The psychological warfare kicked off the night before. Mexican supporters absolutely flooded the streets outside the English hotel with midnight fireworks, sirens, and revving motorcycle engines, just doing everything they could to ruin the players' sleep. It got so intense that FIFA actually had to set up a 300-meter security cordon. Then, on match day, severe lightning storms started battering Mexico City. Kickoff had to be delayed by an entire hour for safety protocols. So now picture this: exhausted players waiting anxiously in the locker room, eventually stepping out onto a slick pitch completely saturated by torrential thunderstorms. The scene was perfectly set for chaos. Right from the kickoff, the Azteca was just this cauldron of deafening noise and thick green smoke. Mexico came out absolutely flying, using their altitude conditioning to press relentlessly. And in the 15th minute, that pressure nearly broke England. A brilliant cross found Mexico's Raul Jimenez, who launched this powerful diving header right toward the top corner. But out of nowhere, England's goalkeeper, Jordan Pickford, pulled off a spectacular one-handed reflex save. It was an absolute lifeline. Pickford's unbelievable athleticism was literally the only thing keeping England alive during that suffocating opening wave. Then, the match turns into pure, unpredictable whiplash. In the 36th minute, totally against the run of play, Jude Bellingham buries a diving header, 1-0. Just 2 minutes later, Kane slides a pass over and Bellingham strikes again, 2-0. The Azteca is just stunned into total silence. But that silence lasts exactly 4 minutes. Julian Quinones manages to lash a volley right past Pickford, 2-2. In under 10 minutes, the entire momentum of the match just violently swung back and forth. And the frantic pace didn't even stop there. Deep into first-half stoppage time, Mexico was just hammering at the door. Off a corner kick, Cesar Montes looked absolutely certain to head the ball in and tie the game right before halftime. But out of nowhere, there was Jude Bellingham, the same guy who had just scored 2 goals on the complete opposite end of the pitch, making a desperate goal-saving block right on the line. England barely managed to limp into the tunnel, clutching that fragile 2-1 lead, entirely thanks to Bellingham being everywhere all at once. All right, so that brings us to the turning point, the 54th minute red card. This is where the story shifts from a really competitive football match to an absolute fight for survival. England's makeshift right-back Jarell Quansah goes into a challenge on Jesus Gallardo. It's reckless. It's studs up. The ref initially lets it go, but VAR intervenes. The referee checks the monitor, and the decision is devastating.
Straight red card. Suddenly, England's entire game plan is completely shattered. I want you to pause and absorb the stakes for a second. You are trapped in the Azteca. 80,000 fans are absolutely screaming for your downfall. You are already gasping for air because of the altitude, and now you are a man down with nearly 40 minutes left to play against a super-energized Mexican team that completely smells blood. Could England actually survive this ticking clock? I mean, at the time, it felt genuinely impossible. And what happens next is this wild, whiplash, hero-to-villain sequence for Harry Kane. In the 60th minute, despite being down a man, Anthony Gordon gets tripped in the box. Kane steps up, absolute ice in his veins, and buries the penalty. 3-1, England breathes this massive sigh of relief. But just 6 minutes later, Kane is back in his own penalty area defending, and he commits an incredibly clumsy foul. VAR reviews it, penalty to Mexico. Raul Jimenez steps up and coolly slots it home in the 69th minute. Just like that, the cushion vanishes, the score is 3-2, and the stadium totally erupts back to life. By this point, the physical exhaustion is visibly taking over. The English players are literally running on empty. Realizing his team is on the verge of total physical collapse, Thomas Tuchel makes a desperate tactical shift in the 70th minute. He subs on 2 defenders, Jed Spence and giant center back Dan Burn, sacrificing his midfield to form this incredibly compact, flat 5-man defensive line. England wasn't playing to win anymore. They were strictly parking the bus and playing to just survive the altitude. The reality of that decision is pretty staggering. Over the final 15 minutes of regulation, Mexico held the ball 84% of the time. England had a measly 16%. This is what a true, desperate siege looks like in football. 10 exhausted men trapped entirely inside their own penalty area, frantically clearing away wave after wave of Mexican attacks. They couldn't get out. They could literally only weather the storm. And then, just when the English players thought they were finally nearing the finish line, the 4th official holds up the board. 11 agonizing minutes of stoppage time. For a team with 10 men, severely depleted of oxygen, just desperately holding on to a 1-goal lead, 11 minutes feels like an absolute eternity. The psychological weight of seeing that number appear on the board, you really can't overstate it. But somehow, survive they did, mostly through sheer chaotic heroics. In the 80th minute, Mexico's Edson Alvarez misses a golden free header. In the 86th, Jordan Pickford stands tall like a brick wall, denying a massive drive from Gallardo. In the 89th, Pickford is right there again to stop a long-range blast from Fidalgo. The crosses just kept raining in, and finally, in the 102nd minute, literally the dying breath of the game, the ball falls to Jimenez in the 6-yard box. He shoots, but Ezri Konsa throws his body on the line with a totally desperate sliding block. Absolute survival. So when the dust finally settled, the numbers painted a pretty crazy picture. Despite the environmental advantages, despite holding 63% of the overall possession, and despite firing off 14 shots to England's 9, Mexico went home. England somehow advanced with a 3-2 victory while playing almost half the match down a man. It's this stark contrast that really highlights a fascinating dynamic. England's clinical, ruthless efficiency in front of goal ultimately bested Mexico's sheer volume of pressure and environmental supremacy. Which really leaves us to ponder this final question. Was this a brilliant tactical masterclass by Thomas Tuchel, adapting on the fly, locking down the defense, and relying on moments of individual brilliance? Or was this simply a miraculous, gritty survival against impossible odds and extreme altitude? Whatever you conclude, one thing is for sure. This dramatic night at the Azteca is definitely going down in World Cup history. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer today to break down this incredible match. Catch you next time.